Well, well, it looks like the wonderful Doom 2 Hell on Earth just turned 25 today. The sequel of what's widely considered the father of first-person shooters just hit its 25th anniversary, but the question is, how does it really stack up to the original? For the most part, Doom 2 does everything that was present in the original Doom, only there's more of it. You've got a brand spanking new weapon, 9 new enemies, and 32 hull levels to play through. Believe it or not, the new weapon isn't some huge energy weapon or some nuclear device. Instead, it's a double-barrel shotgun known simply as the Super Shotgun. While this may seem like a mundane and even ordinary device next to the BFG and plasma rifle, it's certainly a great upgrade over the pump-action shotgun from the original Doom. For only double the ammo usage and just a bit longer to reload, you get triple the amount of damage output. The only caveat is that it spreads out the pellets much more aggressively, so it loses its punch a lot more quickly in the distance. Despite this, it's a very general-use weapon you can comfortably use the majority of the time, especially given the abundance of shells packed throughout the levels. It's certainly a satisfying weapon to use, as I'm sure LGR would agree considering it's number 2 on his most satisfying weapons list. Another neat little addition is the Megasphere. While the original Doom had Soul Spheres and Blue Armor to pump up your health and armor respectively, the Megasphere is like a beast of science and combines them to instantly put you up to 200 of each. Of course, you're not the only one who's packing more heat here. Doom 2 has a whole host of new enemies to pit that double barrel against. New enemies include the Chain Gun Commando, Hell Knight, Pain Elemental, Mancubus, Arachnotron, Revenant, Archvile, Icon of Sin, and the SS from Wolfenstein 3D. The Hell Knight is perhaps the least interesting since it's just a tan, weaker Baron. However, it serves a very good purpose due to Barons coming off as bullet sponges, so essentially having the same thing but less health allows a good compromise for general use mooks. The Chain Gun Commando is an addition to the human enemies that has a rapid-fire chain gun that can cut through you in seconds if you don't take them out, but thankfully are very frail and can be felled with a shotgun blast if your aim and RNG measure out. The Mancubus is a big bloated enemy that, like the Cyber Demon, fires 3 times in rapid succession but trades projectile damage for spreading the shot, making it more difficult to avoid. Hilariously though, this means it's also exponentially more likely to cause infighting. The Arachnotron is basically a smaller spider mastermind that fires a plasma rifle, while the Revenant packs a weaker rocket launcher that has a chance of producing homing shots, but the most unique are the Pain Elemental and the Archvile. The Pain Elemental summons those lost souls that I'm sure you love so much, while the Archvile has a delayed line of sight-based attack and can resurrect corpses. That makes these two particularly high-priority threats in a crowd, especially the Archvile, because it can even attack you behind other monsters. Of course, the most interesting enemy is probably the final boss, the Icon of Sin, that is essentially a face textured on a wall. While it may seem silly to have a boss plastered on a wall, it was probably the only way they could have a weak spot at the time, which was pretty unique. While it has no actual attacks on its own, it summons demons endlessly until you defeat it by pumping rockets into its exposed brain. One neat little Easter egg that I'm sure you're all aware of by now is that if you no-clip through the opening, you can see the severed head of id Software programmer John Romero. If you take its vocal message for the player and play it in reverse, you even hear,
"When the demon will meet John Romero."
The levels have a decent amount of variety and range from okay but forgettable to actually pretty iconic in my opinion. My personal favorite is the O of Destruction. It starts out fending off a crowd similar to Perfect Hatred from Ultimate Doom, but with more area to move around in, and with the addition of more hard-hitting hit-scan enemies to keep you on your toes. Interestingly, there's a secret level found in the Industrial Zone, or Map 15, that contains the 1st and 9th level of Wolfenstein 3D. It's here that you'll face the aforementioned SS guards from that game. Functionally, they're pretty identical to Chain Gun Commandos, but it's a neat little Easter egg nonetheless. Of course, the dogs are now Pinkies, Gross is now a Cyber Demon, and you get to kill Commander Keen 4 times over to get to the exit. While understandably not as iconic as the original Doom, and arguably not as consistent in the level design, Doom 2 still brings plenty of that good old Doom action with a greater sense of variety than ever before. While the original Doom was content to give mostly projectile hit scan and a couple of melee enemies at you, Doom 2 seeks to inject more diverse casts of monsters with more unique ways of ruining your day, and I think that's commendable. You can also tell they were a lot more experimental in the level design this time around, which is very commendable too. While I did joke in my Game Boy Advance review that the plot essentially boils down to find demons, shoot them in the face, then find their leader and shoot it in the face and live happily ever after, but there's a bit more to it than that. Of course, in Doom fashion, it's mostly told through text walls, but it's still pretty interesting to say the least. Essentially in the 3rd episode, Doom Guy gets out of hell only to find out that the demons beat him there. It seems the fourth episode Thy Flesh Consumed was meant to bridge the gap between Inferno and Doom 2, with the Doom guy apparently very cross over the death of his pet rabbit Daisy. You can mess with a man's planet and even doom his species to extinction, but when you mess with his pet rabbit, there's gonna be hell to pay. The Doom guy has to fight his way through demons, allowing what remains of humanity to escape via a starbase, and then fight back to his hometown and back into hell to face the dreaded Icon of Sin that spearheaded the invasion. Basically, the story is short, sweet, and to the point, which seems to follow Carmack's ideology that stories and games are meant to be there, just not that important. Plot clearly wasn't the highest of priorities here, but it kinda doesn't need to be either. It gets the job done, and given that many of the levels resemble actual locations such as tech bases, cities, and even an abandoned mine in one case, you can probably fill in the blanks with your own imagination. And of course, there are also mods like the Doom Tribute Project if you really want to see it in a little more depth. While it uses the exact same engine as the original Doom, Doom 2 is noteworthy for having much larger levels and with a greater sense of diversity in the terrains. While the original Doom focuses largely on tech bases with Inferno mixing hell into the mix, Doom 2 goes for a pretty broad approach. This can be both a good and a bad thing depending on how you look at it, and they seem to experiment a lot more this time around. Heck, one level's gimmick is basically that there's a crap ton of explosive barrels everywhere, and it's fittingly called the Barrels O' Fun. Two noteworthy levels are the Chasm and the Industrial Zone, the reason being that they were so big that they actually had to be split in half in the Game Boy Advance version. The new enemies also fit very well next to the originals, although the Revenant's sprite seems to be a little tall for its hitbox, and as a result you can see its head clip through lower ceilings sometimes. The new sound effects are also quite fine for what they are, and the Archvile's death sound is interesting in a disturbing meta kind of way, since it's apparently a girl asking why, but it's distorted. The Revenant and Archvile also have unique chase sounds, which I'm sure most people would be grateful for because they tend to be among the more difficult demons to face up against, so knowing that they're on your tail really helps. The music is also much more interesting than the original Doom soundtrack because while Doom 1 had some melancholy and even strangely whimsical tracks at times, Doom 2's track ranges from the likely burn into your head running from evil to the cool jazzy healer stocks. The music for the Icon of Sin is also very appropriately creepy sounding, and of course the two Wolfenstein levels have music lifted straight from that. From a presentation standpoint, just like with the gameplay, Doom 2 basically takes everything that you loved about Doom 1 and makes it even bigger and better for the most part. Doom 2 is often considered the weaker of the two due to having less consistency in its level design and just not being the one to start it all. While the original Doom released in 1993 was a grand achievement of technical mastery and Doom 2 can never hope to outshadow it, it does make a very worthy follow-up with a lot of interesting additions and sense of variety that stays interesting the whole way through. Even outside of the modding community, which of course takes heavy advantage of Doom 2's extras, I would heavily advocate for the game. It's basically Doom 1 but bigger and badder. Think of it less as a sequel and more of an expansion pack. If you liked the original Doom, then hopefully you'll love Doom 2 as much as I do. I'd consider it like the Majora's Mask to Doom 1's Ocarina of Time. It may be essentially a hand-me-down with the same engine, but it has a lot to bring to the table. Thank you so much for watching my review, and I'll see you next time. Now pick up a double-barrel shotgun and go rip and tear.